Hello there, I'm James McQuiggan, and this is the Cybersecurity and You presentation, going through and discussing about how to protect yourself from cybersecurity threats at work, and more importantly, at home. So to get things started, as I said, my name is James McQuiggan, and I'm a security awareness advocate over at KnowBe4. I'm also a college professor teaching cybersecurity classes, so I thoroughly do enjoy talking about cybersecurity and sharing information with you today. Now, if you haven't heard of KnowBe4, we do security awareness and training. We do phishing simulations. We're now in our 12th year, based out of Clearwater, and our CEO used to run an antivirus company for many years. He retired, and in those few days of retirement, he realized that cyber criminals were getting in because not only of taking advantage of malware or through those data breaches, they were getting in because of the human being. So he focused on an organization where he could create software to help people understand when it comes to phishing and understanding about the different cybersecurity attacks that are out there. For the mission statement, and this is one of the reasons I'm glad that I work at KnowBe4 and I'm proud to be a part of it, is that we want to help organizations deal with the ongoing issue of social engineering. For me personally, it's wanting to help people make smarter security decisions every day. I know that I've been doing this for many years, and I think a lot of folks just aren't aware of the dangers that are out there. So it's important that we bring that awareness to folks and get them to understand why it's important that we do it. And that's what this presentation is going to cover today. So we're going to go over cybersecurity and you. Why is that really important? We're then going to talk about the current threats that are out there, so you have that awareness and understanding of how cyber criminals are going through and doing these attacks. And then we'll do a quick wrap up we're going to go from current threats, then we're going to talk about cyber hygiene, what you can do to make sure that you're protecting yourself, and then we will do a wrap up at that point. So cybersecurity and you. Well, when we look at all the different data breaches that have gone on, and especially when we look at the reason why Stu started up KnowBe4, it's because of the fact that humans are the biggest attack vector. A lot of the times I've seen IT and I've heard IT folks and information security and folks in that part of the industries always say that humans are the weakest link. They just don't know, they haven't learned, and so they end up clicking on a link and, they're the weakest link. For me, it's more of the fact that they are the biggest attack vector. They're constantly targeted because of that lack of awareness. And so it's important that we understand what to look for when it comes to those social engineering attacks. And a lot of the time, it comes down to 6 different areas that people think about when it comes to cybersecurity. And this is basically off a victim profile that got created by a good friend of mine, who's a now retired special agent with the FBI. And he worked in cybercrime for about 25 years. And he came up with this profile based on the experience that he had. And I kind of snagged it from him and retweaked some of the stuff. But essentially, a lot of the time people think it just can't happen to them. And we think about that when it comes to natural disasters and everything else as well out there. But, we can be a victim of cybercrime. So it's important that, we think that it can happen to us. And so we have to remain vigilant and be aware. A lot of the time people think that cyber criminals are extremely sophisticated. When you look at some of the nation states and the way that they work, like Russia and China, North Korea, those attackers that are going on there, some of the more well-known cyber criminal groups, there's a certain level of sophistication that they already have and understanding. However, it's not as sophisticated as one might think, because until recently, we've actually been hearing a lot more stories of teenagers breaking into organizations. It happened with Twitter last year. It happened with Uber just recently. And again, with Rockstar Games. All of these organizations were broken into by 18-year-olds through some type of social engineering. So while there is a level of sophistication, it's not hard for some of these cyber criminals that are out there to learn what they need to know. YouTube videos, practicing in their own home test labs or on real systems. But there is a strong sense that it's not as sophisticated as we might think. Then we have critical account weakness and password reuse, and these go hand in hand because a lot of the time folks aren't securing their accounts using multi-factor authentication, or they're reusing old passwords. And recently I had a friend of mine who unfortunately had her social media account breached because of her password reuse. And unfortunately she lost the account because they were able to use it, and she didn't have MFA, multi-factor authentication, on her account. If you're not sure what MFA is, that's okay. We're going to go through it later on in the presentation. The other aspect is latest scam awareness and silver bullet protections. A lot of it comes down to just not knowing. If you were walking down the street in New York City, for an instance, and somebody opened up their coat and said, "Hey, I got a Rolex watch. Do you want to buy it?" You're going to realize that it's a scam pretty quick. And a lot of the times folks just aren't aware that they're scams and end up falling victim to it. The silver bullet protections, this is looking at the sense of just because you've got the one thing, you're protected, like a firewall, like antivirus. And it takes a lot of different layers and a lot of different aspects to be able to protect yourselves and your organization. For me, people are a critical layer within the fabric of the security programs. Whether because we're using computer systems, because we have email, we're using software in our organizations, and we have it at home as well. It's important to realize that we're an important part of the security program, and we're going to be talking about that as we go along. But when we look at us as humans, we're really smart people. We're educated, we've been to school, we're smart, and well-educated folks. But the kicker is, we still have folks that fall victim to social engineering. So how is it that we fall victim to all this social engineering attacks that go on? So what I want to do is kind of get to the root of the issue and talk about our brains, why we think a certain way, why is it we see certain things and think of something differently. Let me give you an example. The phenomenal power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place, and also the length of the word. Now, for some of you where English may not be your second language, you're going to look at this and know that the spelling is completely off. For people that have been speaking English or reading English for a long time, they're going to be able to go through and automatically process that. Your brain is automatically going through, it's interpreting it, it knows what the word is, and moving on. And so our brain is automatically going through and processing this information very, very quickly. Which brings me to the issue of our brains kind of operate on two different systems. We have our system 1 and we have our system 2. And the system 1 is the fast thinking. It's emotionally driven. It operates about 95% of the day. And then we have our system 2, which is more methodical, takes a lot more effort. And again, this is something that we use to do problem solving. So if I were to say, what's 2 plus 2, and snap my fingers, you're going to be able to give me the answer pretty quickly, and we know that it's 4. If I were to say, what's 5,683 divided by 22? Unless you're a math prodigy, you're going to have to sit down with either a piece of paper and a pencil and do the long division to go ahead and figure that out. Or maybe you just bust out a calculator or the calculator app on your phone to go through and calculate it. But our brains are constantly working on that system 1 and system 2 thinking. And I honestly believe that when we're doing email, people are wanting to get through the email quickly. They want to get on to the next one. They want to try and clear out their mailbox overall. And so they're working very quickly on that system 1 thinking. So when it comes to email, it's always a good idea to maybe consider slowing down just a little bit and reviewing the email before or anytime you're about to click on a link, that you take a couple extra seconds to review what the link, who it's from, what the message is, just to make sure that you are aware that what you're clicking on is actually a safe link. Now, what we're talking about trying to be doing here today with the cyber hygiene and with even this email tip is the fact that we're trying to change some habits. Kind of at a crossroads where we have our habits, our old habits that we have, and then we have to try and change them. And every year, at least I know in my house, we make those New Year's resolutions on December 31st. In the new year, we're going to exercise more. We're going to eat better. We're not going to watch as much TV. And by the end of the month, we are sitting on the couch, eating chicken wings, drinking beer, and watching, movies on TV. It's very difficult for us to be able to change a habit unless we do it frequently, over and over and over again. And so that's what we're looking at trying to do with some of these habits that we're going to talk about today and how we can work to improve them. Now, before we get going, does anybody know what a computer's favorite snacks are? Yeah, it would be microchips, fish sticks, and cookies. So, I'm not going to confirm or deny there's going to be more of these sprinkled throughout the presentation. All right, so let's talk about the current threats. Let's talk about what's going on out there and what we need to be aware of. Now, when I show you a picture of this, and we have the cyber criminal, or the hacker, as everybody will call it, the person in the hoodie, sitting in the basement, clicking away, trying to gain access into organizations. For me, these are cyber criminals, and a lot of the time they're not sitting in hoodies. They are out in the open, and we're just not really aware of it. But basically, when it comes to cyber criminals, they're in it for one thing and one thing only: money. Bottom line, plain and simple, they just want to make money. And so a lot of what they're doing is for that. They're either going to steal data to hold it for ransom, get the organization to pay, or they're going to steal data and sell it, like email addresses, passwords, and other personal identifiable information that they can sell, credit cards, credentials, because they want to try and make money overall. So when we look at the root of a lot of the attacks that get started out there, it's because of phishing, the social engineering aspect within our email. And from phishing, we get into things that lead into ransomware, business email compromise, different password attacks, gift card scams, and eventually at some point, a data breach gets recognized and organizations are dealing with that. Now, phishing overall is not getting any better. It has been increasing. We saw a bit of a dip at the beginning of the year, but it's been rising steadily again. And essentially, it's something that we're having to deal with. Organizations are having to deal with all the time. Now, with phishing, for me, the way I look at phishing with an organization is anybody that has an email address for the organization has a key to the front door of that organization, an electronic key. Because you have an email address, you have a work machine, and you are connected to the work environment, if you click on a link or open up an attachment that launches a malicious attack or connects to the cyber criminal's computer and they're now able to get in, you have essentially opened up that front door. Now, I know a lot of people think, well, that's what we have IT for. That's what the technology is for. It's supposed to stop all that. Why aren't they stopping it? A lot of what cyber criminals do is they go out and buy the same technology that all of us are using within our organization. And they are trying their emails against those systems to see what gets through, what's getting by the filters. And whatever gets through, they set aside and they go, okay, this is now part of our arsenal. And then the ones that don't, they get rid of and try again. And there's pretty well about 85 to 90% of the email does get stopped at the gate in those electronic devices. However, because cyber criminals are constantly changing their game and constantly stepping it up, we have to do the same. And so that's the reason behind this education, behind providing awareness for everybody with regards to phishing and essentially having that key to the front door for the organization. And there's a lot of social lures that get on that are used by cyber criminals, whether it's through greed, hey, everybody loves money, whether it's curiosity, whether sometimes it's fear. They like to try and send emails pretending to be coming from the government. It might even be self-interest or even helpfulness. And so within an organization, you're probably going to have some type of phishing simulation to make sure that they know that you're aware of what to spot within an email to see if it's fake or not. And a lot of the time, people think that it's a gotcha moment. They think that the IT folks, the phishing simulation folks, they are all trying to catch you. They want to catch you and, make you feel bad and everything else. And that's not really the case. It's a learning moment. And I know that may sound difficult to hear because when we get a phishing email and we click on that link and we get frustrated. And when we get frustrated with it because we are smart people. We've been educated and everything else, and we just don't understand why we end up falling victim to it. And essentially what ends up happening is when we click on that link, we kind of go through a bit of a shock, because once we realize that we've clicked on it and it is a phishing email, we kind of go through shock at first. And then we go through denial, thinking, no, I closed down the window, nothing really bad happened. Then there's anger because we're upset with ourselves. And then eventually we have some type of an acceptance. And so it's a matter of having to go through with those phishing simulations, to go through and essentially get us prepared and aware of the different phishing techniques that cyber criminals like to use. Now, this popped up before. We've seen a lot of this going on in the last year with regards to the QR codes, with what we like to call quishing. There's all kinds. There's other names that folks are having, but essentially wanting to make sure that when you're going to click on a QR code, that you trust the QR code, that you know what website you're supposed to connect to when you do that. So it's a good idea if the organization or the restaurant or wherever it is has these, that you can verify what it's supposed to bring up when you click on it, scan it, and click on it. So. Business email compromise is another big concern that's out there. This is kind of the silent killer that's out there. Cyber criminals that are launching business email compromise scams are usually doing it because they're getting inside the mail servers, they're getting inside the different systems within the organization, and nobody knows about it. A lot of the time cyber criminals will go 80 to 200 days before somebody discovers that something strange is going on, and start doing an investigation and discover that unauthorized accounts, data exfiltrated, and so forth. But cyber criminals like to do the wire transfer fraud, where they'll be monitoring the email of the finance person, we'll say, and an invoice will come in from a vendor that they've worked with. We'll say it's for $500,000, 500,000 euros, pounds, whatever, but a large amount of money. Well, the cyber criminals will look to see who it's coming from, and then very quickly spin up a new domain similar to what it is for that website, for that organization, and then send an email into them to basically say, hey, we've changed. We know we just sent you in an invoice dated this with this number, because they've seen all that information. We've got to let you know that we've had a change in our payment systems. Whatever banking information. And then they give them the banking information for them, the cyber criminals, and then the organization ends up paying the cyber criminals, not knowing that it's a fake email. And then could be 30, 60, 90 days later, that vendor comes back and go, hey, you didn't pay us. And lo and behold, they get back to them and go, yeah, no, we paid you. Here's the transaction. Here's the info. And they'll go, that's not our account information. We didn't send that email. So now the organization has to pay out twice. Once they've already done the cyber criminals, and now actually back to the vendor that did the work and provided the services for them. So it's always crucial. Gift card fraud's been another issue, and cyber criminals like to operate a little differently with this one, where they will send an email in to somebody that's new to the organization, been there for a few weeks, that has had the onboarding but not really fully immersed into the organization, and they'll make it appear to come from the CEO or upper management. And it won't have a link and it won't have an attachment. It will simply ask, are you in the office today? Or another simple question. Hey, do you have a moment to talk? Whatever it may be. But what they're looking to do is kind of get the victim to reply. And if they do, then they put in the request that goes, hey, we need to get you need to go out and get us some gift cards for some clients. I'm about to go into a meeting. I'm not reachable by phone, but you can email me. And so the cyber criminals are leveraging that. And that's been a $23.5 million enterprise for them so far. So unfortunately, the way that what's happening with that. Then we have ransomware. And ransomware is the big flashy one that we all hear about. Organizations getting hit, losing their data because the cyber criminals have encrypted it. And we're seeing now more and more attacks on specific targets, going for bigger targets that do do a lot of collaboration with third parties or have a lot of customers that they provide a service for. And so they're looking to disrupt them and then not only extort that organization, but also the organizations that they're supporting as well. And if they're able to steal data that relates to employees or clients, they'll go after the employees and clients to go, hey, we have this data about you, but if you give us $300, 300 pounds, 300 euros, we'll get rid of it for you. That's the kind of extorting that's going on. We've even got to the point where some of them are now saying, if you contact law enforcement, we're going to release your data as well. So ransomware has become a very big, flashy type of attack that's out there. It's the one we hear a lot about overall. So, anybody know how the cyber criminals got away from the FBI? Yeah, they ransomware. So one of the other aspects of different attacks that are out there are insider threats, where cyber criminals are reaching out to people that work at organizations. It's not that hard to figure out what kind of the style of email address that might be for a particular organization, but they leverage that. They're looking at people on LinkedIn, on Reddit, on social media that are disgruntled, reaching out to them and sending out these kinds of emails, because it's a lot easier to hack the human than it is to hack the technology, bypass all of that, and gain access into the organization overall. Oops, went the wrong way. Password attacks are another common issue where over the last 30 years, where we've had we've had data breaches go on with the cyber attacks, and essentially cyber criminals have been collecting up usernames and passwords and creating a huge database. And basically this has all become a collective or a comb. And the comb is a collection of massive breaches. And essentially it's a collection of all the usernames, all the passwords that have been stolen and sitting in a large database for cyber criminals to use. So much so that they were able to use it to attack a water treatment plant here in Florida, where they had a VPN connection, an application running, and the accounts that had access to it were exposed in a data breach. The passwords weren't changed, and so the cyber criminals, through password reuse, were able to gain access into that water treatment plant and start messing around with the controls. Luckily for the plant, the control room operator noticed somebody doing something unusual and changing values that shouldn't seem right, so they disconnected the connection, which then launched a full-scale investigation by the FBI and everybody in the U.S. But because the organization wasn't monitoring their accounts for their email addresses and passwords being involved in data breaches, they ended up providing an open door for cyber criminals to get in. So when we talk about passwords, I'm really curious, as you look at these, would you consider these weak passwords and difficult to hack or figure out? Well, ironically, there's a team of password hackers, we'll call them, that basically were able to go through and crack those passwords without doing brute force. And brute force is where you try every letter, character, number combination in sequence to try and get a match. They use what are called rainbow tables, and a rainbow table is part of that, what that comb is, that collection of massive breaches. They're taking all the known passwords and trying those, and were able to discover a variety of passwords that meet all the password criteria. It's got letters, numbers, lowercase, uppercase, special symbols, and lo and behold, they were able to reverse engineer, so to speak. But they were doing it quite quickly because they were using pretty well high-end systems. I mean, they had to pay several tens of thousands of dollars to build the system, but when you consider on how many passwords you could probably crack and sell those with a user account, they could make their money back pretty quick overall. But who's at risk? When we talk about all these current threats that are out there, who's at risk? Is it the folks that are seasonal, the new employees, people that have been around a long time, senior officials, CEOs, maintenance staff, HR staff, people that are active on social media? No. Everybody is at risk. And so that's why it's important that we're all aware of the different dangers that are out there and how we can protect ourselves. But with all this cybercrime that's out there, I've always really been curious, how come Superman doesn't help us fight cybercrime? Well, that's because he's afraid of cryptocurrency. Okay, so now let's talk about cyber hygiene. This is what you're all here for. And essentially cyber hygiene, like the word hygiene, things that we do every day to keep ourselves clean, keep ourselves healthy. Well, from a cyber hygiene standpoint, these are things that we can protect ourselves from being breached, losing our passwords, losing our identity, losing our data. So talking about cyber hygiene. We're going to go over password vaults. We're going to talk about browser safety. We're going to talk about what you need to look for when checking your links, how to check your email, talk about multi-factor authentication, and then touch upon social media a little bit as well. Okay, so avoid saving personal information in your browser. Now you're thinking, well, I don't save any personal information in my browser. In Chrome and in Edge and Firefox, they all have that wonderful little feature that says, hi, when you go to log in on a website, it comes up and it goes, hi, would you like us to save your password in the browser? That's extremely convenient, but also extremely dangerous. And the reason for that is, and it's a feature that's offered, and it's a great feature because it makes life a lot easier when you got to go in and log into a site. You don't have to remember what the password is. It's saved for you. That's fine, but the problem is browsers are designed to display web pages. And when you've got them saving your passwords and personal information, that's not what it was really designed for. They might be encrypting it a little bit, but it's not a strong encryption. So much so that the image here is of Kevin Mitnick, who is the KnowBe4 Chief Hacking Officer. And in a conversation with him, he mentioned that if they gain access into somebody's system, if they're doing an assessment on an organization and part of that means they get access into somebody's computer, it's very easy for them to be able to go in and steal all of their passwords from their computer. It's the first thing they do. They have software that can very quickly download all the information out of the browser, and if it's passwords, decrypt those or just basically download them because they're not encrypted. So when it comes to your browser, it's a good idea to not use that to save your passwords, but use a password manager. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. I mentioned before about passwords being leaked that are out there. Here is a way on a website that I highly recommend that you can check. And there's other ones out there. You can Google it and figure out which is the best one for you. But this is one of the better ones out there. The guy's out of Australia that runs it. And it's Have I Been Pwned, pwned.com. And you can enter in your email address or your phone number, and they will let you know if that account has been involved in a data breach at some point. And if it has, then you certainly want to take the notice that I need to go change that password and make it unique and different from all my other ones. Once you've provided your email address, he does have a service, I believe it's free, where he will email you if your email is discovered in another breach. So it's a good way to be able to protect yourself from knowing that if your account's been involved in any data breaches, that you can go and change that password right away. And if the site does offer multi-factor authentication, you can add that to the account to add that extra layer of security as well. Now, I've touched upon password vaults. Usually when I do this presentation live, I always like to ask people, who uses a password vault? And I usually get about 10% of the people. So hopefully you listening now, if you don't use one, that you might consider using one. And if you do use one, great. But essentially, the password vault is a great way to be able to store information about your username, your passwords, any security questions, any backup codes for multi-factor authentication, anything relating to an account that you end up creating. Now, I personally have been using one, and so I'm sure somebody will ask me in the Q&A, what do I use for my password manager? But I've been using one for about 10 years, and I've got about 800 entries in that password vault. And for me, they are secure, they're protected, they're all stored in one place. I don't have to worry about what my password is because I have that password manager generate it for me. And those passwords are anywhere from 16 to 25 to 30 characters long. Whatever the website where I'm creating the account, whatever that maximum is, that's what I go for. It's all randomly generated. I have no idea what it is. I just copy and paste when I visit that website or that app. Every single time. I just use my password manager, open it up, grab the account, I already know what the username is, so I just copy the password, and then I paste it in. It does take a couple extra seconds, but it's those couple extra seconds that I know is worth the time because now I've got it from a secure environment and I'm not reusing an old password, so there's not that opportunity that I could get that be involved in a data breach. Now, why don't people like to use password managers? And I get it because I've had lots of conversations with friends that aren't in cybersecurity with regards to this. A lot of the times they're like, "Oh, it takes too long. I'm going through, I got to go look it up." And it's like, I get it. But like I said, I'd rather take those couple extra seconds than have to deal with months and years of issues of identity theft or fraud or anything happening to my accounts. Sometimes folks say it's a lot easier just to store it in the browser. Sure. Again, you're balancing that risk and convenience aspect. Do you want to take the risk that if your system is compromised or your organization is compromised, that they're going to dump everything out of the browser? So there's that consideration as well. Sometimes people like to use Word or Excel. That's the first thing cyber criminals go for. The final thing is the folks that think that it's a single point of failure. I got all my passwords in there, and then if my database is stolen, they can hack into it. If you have a strong passphrase or password that's 16, 18, 20 characters long, with the encryption that's on that password vault, you are the only one that knows that password to get in there. The company you're hosting it with does not. So it's important that you go through, make sure you've got a strong password. And if it were to get stolen, well, it's going to take them a long time to be able to crack that anyway. But that's why it's important to make sure you're using a password on your password vault that's 16 to 20 characters long. Anybody know why you can't use the word beef stew as a password? Yeah, it's because it's not stroganoff. All right, so let's talk about multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is the concept of where you have different levels of authentication to access your accounts. You have a username and password right now. That is something you know. Something you have is going to be a code that gets sent to you either by SMS or you get a code from a authorization authenticator app, or it might be a hardware token that you have to plug into your computer. That is all something you have. And a lot of the time we've been seeing the SMS with the attacks going on. So one of the biggest recommendations that we make is use an authenticator app that you can have on your phone and then that you can back it up. Being able to go through and back up those codes is important. Using the application for your authentication is a lot better. If you start ever getting text messages from some service with a code saying, here's your code to log in, and you're getting that repeatedly, I would make sure you go visit whatever account that's for. And if you're not sure, then you may want to check the number that it's coming from, do a Google search, see if you can figure out which service, which company is it, because basically what's happening is you have a cyber criminal trying to gain access into your accounts, and they've got your username and password already. They're basically sending a bunch of codes, waiting for you to give up the code. And so it's important that if you are going to use SMS and you start getting those messages, that it could be a cyber criminal trying to gain access. The hardware token is a good resource as well, but the downside is if you end up forgetting it home or you lose it or it breaks, you have to go through a little more invasive process to gain access at that point. So when it comes to your passwords, always use MFA wherever possible. Plain and simple. Just take out a lot of the concerns and use MFA wherever possible. You certainly want to use those complex passwords, 16, 20, 25 characters long, completely randomized. And then that way you don't have to, it makes it a lot harder for cyber criminals to gain access. That rig that we saw earlier would take them even longer to try and gain access. Have that password manager so that everything is stored in there. And then if you have to create your own, and I've been on websites where they don't allow you to paste in a password, which is extremely frustrating, but they don't allow that feature to paste. So usually if you have to create your own, a passphrase usually works. Use like a sentence, or take the first letter from a favorite song or verse and use that. So that way you just have to remember the song, add in the special characters and the numbers, and that'll make things a lot easier. Your passphrase is going to be fine for that. So I don't know if anybody heard, but with the new version of Apple and Android, they're going to make it so that all you have to do is smile at your phone to unlock it. Yeah, they're calling this two-factor authentication. Okay, so let's talk about some social media real quick. A lot of the times on social media, it's important that you're aware of your privacy settings. Know what you're sharing out with people that you know and don't know. If you have it set up like on Instagram or on TikTok or Snapchat where you're publicly sharing it with everybody, be aware of what information is that you're sharing. At the beginning of the pandemic in early 2020, I jumped on TikTok. I was really curious to see what it was all about. And I know as a lot of people started following I was following certain people, and they may have had some cute, nicknames like Mr. and Mrs. Riddler, but they were still sharing quite a bit of information out there. And using some tools, basically just using the internet and doing some Google searches, I was actually able to find what their real name was. I was able to figure out where they lived, and because of public records, figured out when they got married, who their family was, where they grew up. And I did all that in about 25 minutes. So with regards to social media, you want to make sure you're careful about what you're sharing. Make sure you're only sharing it with people that you know and trust. Beware of any third-party apps that are out there that you end up, if you log in on another website using your Facebook credentials, you're now giving that website access to your Facebook profile. So it's important that you go through, kind of like a spring cleaning, go through and verify that you still want applications to access whatever social media platform. And you can do an easy Google search to figure out what third-party apps you have connected to your social media. And just remember, once you post something, it's always posted that's out there. Because cyber criminals love to take advantage of trying to find information about you. This way they can use it to build rapport with you. They might even then try to phish you, pretend to come from a friend, or share information or have information in the email that you would have posted online. You may not have remembered about it, but they'll use that to build rapport. So it's important that whatever you're posting online, and go through and do a search for yourself or Google yourself. Put your first name and last name, put it in quotations, use your mailing address, even put your cell phone number. See what kind of information pops up when you do a Google search on yourself. Now, earlier when I talked about email, we had, you have that key to the front door for your organization. And so I have 3 quick questions that you can ask yourself with every email. And I go through this every time I get an email. And now, because it's so repetitive, it's become a habit of mine. And I want to share that habit with you. And the first one is the email unexpected? Is this person a stranger? Is whoever sending it to you, are they a stranger? Are they asking you to do something in a hurried or unusual manner? Does it seem strange? And if I answer yes to any of these, then I'm going to take an extra step and verify either through some sort of secondary connection. I'm either going to check the link, I'm going to check the email address. If it is somebody I know who it is, I'm going to reach out to them and go, hey, did you mean to send me this email about, looking at this video because you think you saw me in it? Those are taking those extra steps, that extra couple of seconds could save you a lot more time and effort as you try to recover your identity or stolen data or whatever it may be. With KnowBe4, we do also have these 22 other questions you can go through and ask to help further deep dive. This would be what you'd use if you weren't sure after the 3 questions. This would make life a lot easier overall. And of course, we're always talking about checking your links. And when you check your links, you want to make sure that the website's accurate. And it's important to make sure you're not seeing any transposed characters, reversed or switched characters on the website address. Remember before with the study at the beginning of the presentation where with Cambridge University, the letters were all mixed up, but the first and last letter were in the right spot. And our brain was able to interpret that. And if we're using that system 1 thinking, we're going to gloss right over it and completely miss it. So it's a good idea to go through and check when you're checking the links that the website's accurate as well. So seeing as this whole presentation has been in PowerPoint, does anybody know why PowerPoint crossed the road? Yeah, it was to get to the other slide. Okay, so let's wrap this up. I'll do some final thoughts and then we'll take some questions. So, what is it like for your IT team? They're the knight, they're protecting the organization, they've got defense in depth, they've got the monitoring, they've got all the policies. They're just an awesome IT team overall. And then somebody clicks on a link. And it's like that arrow right between the visor. It takes you right out. So that's why it's important. We got to be aware of what we're clicking on with those links. Because I know this is what it feels like some days. When it comes to cybersecurity and all these rules and all this information and all the cybercrime, oh my gosh, how do I protect myself? Essentially, I know that's what you're going to feel like as that little digger sitting there trying to dig out the big giant tanker or the cargo ship that was stuck in the Suez Canal. And that big tanker is cybersecurity. It's just a matter of taking it one bite at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So it's important to go through and make sure that you're going through. We're looking at trying to change some of those old habits, and having to go through and to change those habits, it has to be done frequently, and we got to do it over and do it frequently, over and over and over again. So I want to leave you with a quote from a friend of mine that basically said, look, this isn't all about security awareness and trying to change behaviors. It's about you valuing security and being proactive to help reduce the risk of an attack for your organization, basically. We want you to take security seriously. Everybody needs to, because if you end up clicking on that link and the cyber criminals are able to come through the front door because you've opened it, then it's going to present a lot of problems for the organization overall. So we're all responsible for helping protect the organization. Our IT team are going to do a lot more to protect the infrastructure and everything else. But we have to make sure that we're doing our part as well. So we want to remember that we use that system 2 thinking for emails. Don't be rushing through it. If you get an email, something strange, go through that. Always check the links. It's okay to trust, but we want to make sure we verify as well. If you're not sure, check with your IT team. We want to work to keep security top of mind, especially when it comes to our email and the software and the accounts, passwords, and everything else. And again, remember, you have a key to the front door for your organization. Finally, does anybody know what an air conditioner and a computer have in common? Yeah, they're both useless when you open Windows. So I want to thank you very much for your time, your attention during this presentation, and hopefully we'll get a chance to take some questions. Thank you.